This is Benny, and welcome back to the JoyCamp podcast, episode, 7 or 8, somewhere in there. I'm not joined by Kevin today, but I am joined by another good friend of mine, a gentleman I met at the Anarchapulco conference a few years ago, at the first ever Anarchapulco conference, and he is a really inspirational guy, and his name is Anam Paiseanta. Anam, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here with you, Benny.
So, Anam, it's an honor to have you on the show. I feel like you are the living embodiment of a true anarchist. And to me, that's really inspirational. I think a lot of people still have a misconception about what anarchy is and what anarchism is and what it means to be an anarchist. And hopefully you can explain a little bit about what anarchy means, what it means to you, what it means to be an anarchist, anything along those lines if you want to, wherever you want to start.
What is my definition of anarchy?
Yes, let's start there.
Okay, well, for me, anarchy or voluntarism or voluntary society is the natural state that humans came here to live in and to express themselves and find their highest potential. Nature itself has like a natural balance that it always tries to find. And there's rules kind of built in that keep everything balanced. And I think that man trying to rule other man has been a stage and a primitive stage in human social evolution that has caused inappropriate subsidies and penalties on human social affairs that have caused these very unnatural aberrations. And that's kind of where anarchy and voluntarism comes in. It's that people have noticed that these artificial systems of governance have really perverted the values and the outcomes that the human experience is in context with. So these front runners and visionaries have identified these issues and come up with this idea that if everything was voluntary, if no one decided that they would initiate force on anyone else, and that there was quick consequences for anyone who tried to initiate force on anyone else to, in effect, become a ruler of anyone else, that we would have the proper outcomes and an authentic experience with nature and with each other. So I imagine that in a voluntary society in the future, when there is no way to coerce your neighbor, you can't vote on how your neighbor spends his money on your pet projects or social programs. You can't use coercion to start any kind of relationship. You have to start any kind of relationship in that future voluntary society. You would have to add value first, whether it be a romantic relationship, a friend relationship, a business relationship. You would have to add value first so that the other parties voluntarily come to you to engage with you, right? And so where both parties are voluntarily participating, it only happens that way because both parties are benefiting. And when we no longer accept interactions where only one party benefits or neither party benefits, then we really will start to see like a shift happening where people's reaction to each other, even an instinct reaction, like a reflex to each other, will be one of helping. Because that even when there's not a profit motive, you see someone drop something or you see someone needs help, your instinctive reflex will be to become a helper and to make the situation better. I think that this is how we're going to make a heaven on earth, or as close as we can. That doesn't mean there still won't be bad actors or people who make bad decisions or act out of selfishness. But unlike our current system, it will not be rewarded, it will not be subsidized, and it won't be bailed out. Good ideas and good actions and proper decisions will be rewarded and therefore will proliferate. Bad ideas that can only exist with subsidy, of course, would then go away. We would see that war would go away because it's always, except for self-defense, it's always more efficient to negotiate and to try to make mutually beneficial exchanges. So there isn't a need in the future anyway for some centralized control authority to rule over others. That was just a primitive stage in humans' social evolution, and it's a fear mindset. If you talk about like the map of human consciousness, and the lower levels are mapped out, that they all have to do with lack, and they all require all the paradigms and systems that come out of those lower levels of consciousness, especially from early in our history. They all require power from outside of them. So your attitudes of lack or fear, your any systems, social systems, any kind of programs that come out of that type of thinking, all requires power from outside of it, and that's why it's not sustainable, and that's why it's probably not part of the future for an evolved humanity. So for these reasons, because I'm very, very concerned with the human experience, the spiritual side of the human experience, and then realizing that anarchy is the only way, it's the only system that fully empowers an individual and society as a large group, that fully empowers the maximum expression of what it is to be human and our maximum potential for how great we really can be. This is why I'm an anarchist.
How far away do you think we are from being able to live in this sort of world where everyone, well, most people, let's say, are operating from a principled place where this environment could thrive? How far away as a species are we from this?
It's really hard to tell because I'm seeing increased polarization, which is common in the end of an era or the end of an empire. You see increased polarization in the population, and we're kind of seeing a three-way polarization happening right now. Like you see the people on the left statist paradigm that want things to be taken care of and soft and nurtured, and lots of social systems and safety nets and a lot of subsidy for not having to try. You see that is increasing, and now it's not just Democrats or liberals. They're like morphing into this Antifa, almost militant.
They're becoming that which they are fighting against.
Yeah, truly. And then on the right, which is normally just conservatives or Republicans, and that would be like the upper limit, except for in extreme cases in history. But now we're seeing more and more of that in the United States and in Europe as well, where there's this extreme right, like a kind of a neo-fascism that's happening, where there's a lot of race division and border loving and these other kind of like things that would divide humanity as a reaction to government policies, especially in Europe, where government policies of population disarmament and subsidying immigration has created turmoil at the street level. You see these like really extreme reactions that are polarizing population either to the right or to the left. But I would say there's a third group that's kind of dividing off of the norm. And that's us. That's the people who are seeing how the system isn't flawed. It's created to be corrupt. And that systems of hierarchical power structures are actually just created to justify the profits of a very small, I don't mean money profits, I mean just the benefits of some kind of an agenda for an extreme small group of people who are pulling the strings. And that we've decided that we're going to research this new way of thinking, which is voluntary society, that's basically like wants everyone to gain as much as they want, to become as strong as they want, to try as much as they want, and then reap the appropriate consequences, and to live free and to do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt someone else. And that the fact that we are kind of dividing off of the normal population and having this awakening is different than the other two kinds of polarizations that are happening, because it isn't promoted by the system. We're actually a reaction to seeing that the system itself should be like avoided, whereas the other two types of polarization are being promoted by the system. So your question, how far in the future is an anarchist voluntary society? It's really, really hard to tell right now, because we're at a point in human history where we could go one way or the other really easily. When things become this intense, this polarized, and this turbulent, it could go one of many ways, and quickly, because people are becoming more and more reactive. And since the outside world has always been a reflection of the inside world, we may see an outside world that's gets a lot more turbulent before it becomes peaceful and free.
I like what you said there about the outside world reflecting the inside world. I've used this as an example of why things seem to be so bad, and also why people have such a inability to see how bad things are sometimes and are so resistant to seeing how bad things are. Because if we can't even face our own inner shadow, our own darkness, how can we possibly face the darkness of the world? And going back to what you said about polarized and turbulent, those are really great words to describe the current climate. I've never seen things so polarized as they are right now. And I've been someone who questions things and a curious person for a very long time. And people's emotional level, reactionary levels are at an all-time high. If you're not fully aligned in 99.9% of their opinions, then you're the enemy. And it's I don't want to say scary, because I'm not scared, but it's an interesting time, and it's a bit alarming to see people so reactionary. So a conservative might say, we need to protect the borders. Absolutely, now more than ever, because what the left is trying to do, the socialist lefts are trying to do, is open up the borders so that we get more votes, which will then fuel this sort of socialist empire that seems to have been in the works for a long time.
That almost makes you think that they count the votes.
Well, elaborate on that a bit.
Well, I just don't think that any ruler in his right mind would allow the general population to actually
Make a decision
about their power.
It's a great point. Yeah.
I personally think, who knows if this is true or not, but I personally think it's very possible that the elite in England created Parliament to displace the apparent power, so that whenever there's an issue in society, the king himself doesn't get beheaded, and that the population can just basically blame each other and then just vote harder next time. It's a
vote harder, vote hard. I could see that actually being a campaign slogan. Get people into the booth.
It should be a movie.
Vote hard. Hashtag vote hard.
Bruce Willis.
This fall, vote hard.
Vote harder. But I am a regular guy that still has to live a normal life and shop for myself and fold my own clothes and do my own economic endeavors to make my money. And I still had enough time to think up this plan of, well, let's make it look like the power is elsewhere so that we can preserve. Step one when you get power is, okay, keep the power. That's step one, right? Even an inbred king from England,
which they are
in the 1600s or whenever,
they're an inbred family,
can come up with this idea of like, oh, well, let's make it look like someone else actually has the power.
It's like the man behind the curtain. That's
the
Wizard
number
of
one
Oz.
way to preserve the power.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that way still, even more so in America, because no matter who gets voted, air quotes, into power, the trajectory of the United States hasn't changed at all for a long time. Just look at the results and look at the history. Look at the wake. That's a good way to say it. Look at the wake of Obama and Bush and Clinton and Bush and Reagan and Carter. Look at the wake. The wake hasn't changed course. The wake is the ripple in the water behind the boat. It's the evidence that the boat was there, even when you don't know what turn the boat's about to make. But if you look at the wake, you can tell where it's been. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the wake of American history, you see that it hasn't changed whatsoever. It's only intensified.
So do you think we should abolish ICE and open the borders and let the immigrants in?
I think it's more than that. I think that if there was a land where people didn't get paid to not work, and the general population was not disarmed, the only people that would want to be there would be people who want to work and not aggress upon their neighbors. What's the problem with letting them in? I say let all of them in. Let anyone who wants to be peaceful and productive. Those are the people who I want as neighbors, and I don't care what color their skin is or what language they speak. That's great. That's just more flavor. But the problem is that we have a central power that's subsidizing certain aspects of society. Mm-hmm. And that's what's causing the aberrations, not if the border's open or closed. I mean, what's an open border? It's where government subsidizes immigration. And what's a closed border? It's where government still is controlling the movement of people. People think it's about open borders or closed borders. No, borders are a government. They're a part of the government. So it isn't even a question of open borders or closed borders. I don't want government controlling or prohibiting or promoting people's movement.
So how do we handle psychopaths under this model in this voluntary society? How do we handle acts of aggression, theft, when they arise, when evil people are trying to sneak their way into positions of power through manipulation? How do we, as an empowered, enlightened, principled community, deal with that?
Yeah, well, psychopaths don't cause atrocities. It's psychopaths that are put in power now have the power is the leverage Otherwise, it's just your crazy neighbor. I mean, he might lash out at one person or two people or whatever, but it's not going to become something like what we've seen in history when psychopaths rise to power. So what's step one? Stop giving psychopaths power. Stop codifying their whims. Laws are basically just the undulating and baseless whims, very often, of people who really don't have connection with those that it will affect. So I would say those are how do we deal with psychopaths? Step one, stop giving them power. Stop having there be a power structure for them to flock to, because that's kind of part of the operation of a psychopath, is to go to where they can do most damage. You know, there's like kind of this religious idea that the devil needs something like government because it isn't omnipresent, right? The devil can't be everywhere at once, but if it takes control of government, it can be. And you know, the devil here could just be like a metaphor for just evil intentions of secret families, or just ill will in general, or psychopathy of the individual that rises to power as well.
Is Satanism the religion of the elite?
You know, I don't know much about that, but if some of the markers, some of the points of Satanism are to not care, to not have sympathy, to not be stopped by the results of your actions when you're interacting with someone else, if the results of your actions hurt someone else, then I would say, in a way, at least, you know, those in power and government itself does exhibit some of the same traits as Satanism. Is everyone at the top of government, you know, like worshiping Lucifer or eating babies or whatever? Like, I have no idea. But they are the kind of people that can drone bomb a school or a hospital somewhere else, and that's just a fact. And I could never even imagine myself doing something like that. So it definitely must be a different type of person than I am, and that I've witnessed anarchists to be.
Someone who's willing to drone bomb might also be the kind of person who eats a baby. I feel like I have more in common with the table that these microphones are on than I do with someone who is okay with bombing another country and killing innocent people.
Truly.
So anybody who's listening up to this point who is not an anarchist, who's just like, okay, but they're probably wondering the answer to this question. But, Anam Paiseanta, what about the roads? Who will build the roads? We need government for the roads.
Well,
how can we build? How do we have things like roads without government?
That's
Anam?
true. It's a great. It's the reason that is always said is because it's super valid. I mean, everything else can be figured out voluntarily, right? But the roads are a flat place that's made out of gravel and tar.
Surely only the government has control of those
or aliens.
materials.
So that's the reason statists always bring that up, is because it's the one thing we can't get over. We could not build a flat place like with a Kickstarter type of campaign, or ask the neighbors to chip in.
But someone might say, what, without the government making sure that it gets done, people don't want to take on that kind of responsibility?
So there's so many assumed definitions there. I'm speaking more seriously now, but there's so many assumed definitions there that have to be kind of unboxed. All we're really saying is, when we say, well, government has to do it, then what we're actually saying is, when we're saying government has to do it versus something else, what we're really saying is, for it to happen, there has to be someone with a gun who's forcing people to contribute. And that's ludicrous. Everything is technical. Everything that's going to happen in the material world is just a technical problem. So where there's a will and a foundational belief that, hey, initiating force is wrong. Just like, people say, well, that's the same kind of objection that they gave when the abolitionists were talking about freeing the slaves. They were like, that's silly. You could never do that. Why? Because who's going to pick the cotton? And the right answer is, I don't give a F who's going to build the roads. I don't get a F who's going to pick the cotton. Slavery's wrong, and forcing people through property taxes or any other kind of initiation of force is wrong. So if we came up with this foundational belief and then said, okay, from now on, we're not going to initiate force on each other, we understand that. So that being said, what are some of our options for paving flat places so that our vehicles can drive on smooth, flat places? I mean, and I actually think that that's one of, as far as like all of society's concerns, roads is one of the simplest ones. There's so many different ways. And I bet you that when a voluntary society is achieved, maybe on small scale at first, maybe it'll just be an island that we buy together.
Liberland.
Or some of
Acapulco.
these, yeah, like Liberland, or like, Roger Ver talking about people buying some land to be a sovereign land from a government that could stand to benefit from that exchange, and then putting anarchist principles to organize that land. There will probably be a plethora of ways to accomplish such a feat of human ingenuity, like build a flat place. There might be Kickstarter campaigns. There might be like HOAs that pave their own neighborhoods, which would still be voluntary because you could choose to, you would know the rules for that before you decided to move into that neighborhood, right? And neighborhoods are small enough that if you didn't want to live in one, you could live in the next one, and you still get to pick and choose which rules you like and which ones you don't. Just as long as it's voluntary, there would be many solutions, I think, for transportation.
You talked about the principles of anarchy. Can you briefly touch on what you consider to be the principles of anarchy?
The principles of anarchy, the thought and the concept is based on the idea that we as individuals own ourselves, that no one has a higher claim on my experience, my labor, my body, my mind, and my free movement. So if that's true, then it's ethical to not aggress upon someone else. So an act of aggression would be to violate the fact that that individual owns all of those things, all of those aspects of themselves in the future, in the present, and in the past. So your future self, the representation of it is anything you produce. If you produce a thing, then that goes into the future as something that you did. So in obverse, it's actually, from the perspective not of the individual, but the one who might aggress, your produce is actually a part of your past. So you could say, like, yesterday I built a chair. So that chair is a representation of the 4 hours I spent building it yesterday. That is me. That's an extension of me. So to steal the chair would be to steal part of your past, right? To cage you would be to take away your free movement, would be to take away I think it goes that is an attack on you in the present. Okay, physical harm is you in the present, and then to cage you is you in the future, to stop your movement, which limits your ability to make decisions in the future. So any act of aggression on those aspects of the human are a claim to be a ruler. If I steal your thing, it's me saying I get to decide about you in the past and the value of the time that you gave in the past. So if your time is like in units, the 4 units that you spent building the chair, if I take the chair, then I'm saying I have a higher claim than you do on those 4 units. So any kind of coercion, any kind of like bodily, physical harm, any kind of theft, any kind of taking someone's produce forcefully, like at gunpoint, like taxes, for example. Even lying. Here's something that's kind of a little bit philosophical, but even lying is an act of aggression when it contributes to a decision that someone else is making. If I give you a bunch of false information and then you go and you decide what to do about it, how that pertains to, how that's relevant to your life, I made a claim on your ability to make those decisions for yourself. So by being cunning and sneaky, I became an influence to the point of being a partial ruler of you. So like anarchists that are really down with their philosophy, really understand anarchism and voluntary society, have to be like radically honest and just let the chips fall where they may. Like, we're not perfect. We're not all awesome. I mean, we're awesome sometimes and we're, fools other times. And a lot of the lying that we do is just to protect the ego. Anarchists realize that it's more valuable to be honest and not try to dissuade someone from a decision they would otherwise make than it is to get the benefits of a lie. And so a philosophically consistent anarchist is not a liar either. This agreement that we make with ourselves and with the universe and with society that we won't aggress on someone else is called the non-aggression principle. And it's how we base ethics. If something is not an act of aggression on someone else and doesn't contribute to someone's harm in one of those aspects of the self, then it's probably okay. And if it does, it's definitely not okay. And it's a part of what should be human history and not human future.
Would you say that the free market capitalism is necessary for an anarchist society, or is there another model that would also work?
The only economic system that is voluntary is capitalism. And by capitalism, I don't mean there's a dude that owns the factory and he's mean to everyone who works in the factory. I mean, capitalism may have different connotation from the Industrial Revolution, but the actual definition of capitalism just means that private parties control economic exchanges. And it doesn't have to be just economic. All exchanges should be voluntary. I'm here right now because I perceive some kind of value in being here, and I assume the same is true for you. So we're both here voluntarily, and then because of that, it's assumed that we're both benefiting. Well, what kind of social or economic system could be better than that? Where every interaction must empower or enrich both sides of the exchange.
And what's being exchanged in this case? So if we're away from this Western model that we're all in, quote, democracy we're all a part of now, if we're no longer attached to the Federal Reserve Bank and the infinite debt and the fiat currency, and we're in a free market capitalistic society, what are we exchanging as currency?
Well, that's a great question. What could be currency? It could be agreed upon per transaction, or there could be a standard that arises, something that is either rare or seen as valuable because it's easily transferred, or it could be, barter in some instances too. Barter is incredibly inefficient because the values of things go up and down. The values of objects, for example, go up and down depending on the needs of the receiver. So therefore, it becomes really inefficient to ascertain if your transactions are of equal value on a case-by-case basis. So barter, while interesting and sometimes beneficial, probably wouldn't be as efficient as using some kind of an agreed-upon medium of exchange. Mm-hmm. So what could that be? Like, what could be seen as rare or seen as easily carryable or easy?
Yeah, is it gold? Is it silver? Is it Bitcoin? Or is it something else? Or is it depend on the transaction like you just outlined?
Well, they define money as being something that has inherent value because it's easy to carry, easy to transfer, easy to divide.
So silver's out.
So, well, silver in large quantities, like for buying really expensive things, might be cumbersome. But I imagine in the future, like let's say the government just went away and government money went away, there could be a multitude of currencies. There could be Bitcoin for transactions at a distance, and there could be gold for large transactions or where in-person anonymity is important. There could be silver for day-to-day transactions, buying a whole bag of groceries or something. But there also could be like more utilitarian type of currencies like bullets, for example. Bullets have innate value. Each bullet actually can perform a function, which is why silver is utility-wise, silver is more useful than gold because it can be used as
it's more malleable.
It can be used as a conductor, and it's one of the best conductors in the world. And because it's cheaper than gold. So it probably has a certain strata in the value scale where Bitcoin and gold might be used for more expensive items, silver might be used for more day-to-day transactions, and then something like bullets might also be transferable for small purchases because each bullet actually has an innate value because of its functionality.
Can we talk about guns for a second? Because I feel like one of the major schisms between a progressive liberal and their ability to understand where an anarchist is coming from is the gun issue. And most people on the left are adamantly anti-gun. Mm-hmm. So how do you get someone to not be so afraid of the idea of gun ownership? Because I know that I used to be anti-gun as a kid, and I still to this day never even shot a gun. But
Dude, we have to correct that.
I know.
There's guns all around you right now. We've got to get on that.
We keep saying that. But still, as it stands right now, I have never fired a gun. But my views on it have completely changed. And now, under this model, again, the what's yours is yours. If nothing else, that is a principle. Who is anyone else to say that I can't have it? If I'm not hurting anybody, if I'm not taking anything from somebody with it, I'm not, shooting anybody with my gun for no reason, no one should be allowed to take that from me. Mm-hmm. But how do you bridge that gap? Because I feel like that is really one of the great, like I said, schisms or chasms between where some people are at and their understanding of what anarchy is. They see the right to own a gun. How do you get them to not be so afraid and so adamantly opposed to people having things like assault rifles?
This topic is so controversial because it's coming from many places in the human's mind and experience. So on the one hand, people are actually saying, I have a desire to feel safe. And if you make any object seem like a threat, I'll be against that object. But when you're hearing someone complain or protest about something, it's important to look at like what's really the motivation here. Like, what are they actually saying? Because with emotional arguments, very often, it's not about the subject. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship with someone who was more emotional than logical. It could be a romantic relationship or a friendship relationship or anything. But very often what they're complaining about isn't the actual topic that they're speaking about or they're concerned about or that they're seeking help about. So if somebody, government, can make guns look like this thing that is the most dangerous part of our society, then those who are emotionally concerned with feeling safe are going to be anti-gun. They're not even going to look at the statistics that doctors cause more deaths than guns by far, even though there's almost one gun for every person in the United States. Guns cause like an insanely small amount of damage every year. And a very small part of our population is doctors. But doctors cause an exponentially larger number of like wrongful deaths every year. But should we ban doctors because the results are so horrible? That's not the answer. Speaking about this topic, like from a philosophical point, I'll say that every animal on this planet has either an apparatus or a technique for self-defense. And humans should not be the only species that give away their apparatus of self-defense to its only predator, other humans. Historically, it's always been a recipe for disaster when the good people give away their power to the people who want power.
And as things stand right now, people with power have guns. A lot of them.
Even though the gang called government has a lot of guns and more organization than the general population, the fact is we have way more guns than they do.
Really?
Yeah. They have maybe tens of thousands of guns. We have over 300 million guns.
The populace...
We have more guns than the military and all the police departments combined.
Is that just America? Wow. I didn't know that.
The power really is with the people, even though the people are asleep here.
Holy moly.
And I think that's something that's kept America from going further into...
Full socialist?
Or any other kind of despotism, is the fact that if you put pressure too quickly and too harshly on the people, those guns will come out and come into play. And I think that's why there may be an agenda with these school shootings and the media coverage of them and how the gun is being blamed and not the pharmaceuticals that all these shooters are on.
Opioids.
They're pointing at the gun because those in government, the people behind the scenes, those people who have been there through many administrations are always seen in photographs back further down the hallway. There have been players in power that have seen many presidents come and go, and those people have this belief that no disaster, no tragedy should be let go without taking advantage of it to further some kind of an agenda. So I think that if there is an agenda to get rid of guns, that this would be the reason, because it really is the one thing, the American gun is the one thing that could stop any kind of major social change caused from the top down. And I'll say this too, the third kind of way to look at this whole gun thing is, if there are people in our town county, state, country, whatever, world, that believe that society should be free of guns or free of ball-peen hammers or free of knives or free of nail files or rocks or anything else that could be dangerous. We as anarchists want to let them live the way they want to live, so that's great. Go find a place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Not everywhere should have the same rules. Some places should have no rules and let nature balance things out as it will. Some places should be full-on government control of every decision you make.
See,
If there's some people that go along with it, that's fine.
I think that's the key right there, is allowing us, or allowing people who want to try something different to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that we often, I know myself included, get lost in the idea of like, how do I change the world?
Yeah.
Well, it's impossible to make the whole world anarchist right now.
Yeah.
But if there are pockets that practice this ideology and these principles, that's all we need to start. Let everyone else follow suit, but you can't, it's not like a light switch going on and off, but you can, turn on the lights in certain pockets and, we live by example. Let's prove it.
Our love is an example.
Let's prove that it's possible. Sure, you want to believe the government is necessary, fine. And you want to keep living in a world that has government, fine. Go ahead. We're going to be over here doing this, and we'll show you that it works.
The problem is that we were raised by a school system that taught us democracy is noble, and it's despicable. It's not noble whatsoever.
It literally means mob rule, democracy.
I mean, the idea that we should vote on everything, let alone anything, it's absurd, and it's primitive. Mm-hmm. It really is primitive to say that, if we want to do something, you have to do it too. It's like two rapists and a hot blonde trying to decide what they're gonna do tonight for entertainment, or like two wolves and a sheep trying to figure out what's for dinner. Yeah. The idea of democracy it truly is despicable, to force anyone to do what you convinced a couple other people to want to do. But so this idea, like, well, if we're going to have a gun-free area, this whole landmass for 3,000 miles wide and 1,500 miles north to south, something like that, has to agree and go along with it. Like, that right there is a paradigm that needs to be shattered and kind of reconstructed in a new way. But, and gun control isn't the only topic for that. There should be, ultimately what we want is for there to be 7.8 billion governments that all interact peacefully and use voluntary exchange as a way to communicate and cooperate. So if we have to engage as a species in secession, where we start to develop smaller and smaller governments as far as land area goes, like break it down to states and then break it down to counties and break it down to townships and just get more and more autonomous, then if there is, let's say, a county that wants to have a supreme grand poobah who decides every aspect of your life, and there's some people who choose to live there, well, that's great. They should do that.
A grand poobah.
And that's why my motorcycle club, Voluntarist Brotherhood Motorcycle Club, supports secession movements, and we will support movements even for people who are communist or some other kind of statist. We will support them seceding because we believe that if, let's say, people of any kind of a statist mindset go and concentrate their efforts in one area, then the people they leave behind in other areas can achieve more freedom. And so it seems kind of counterintuitive for a voluntarist brotherhood motorcycle club to support secession movements of, say, communist California or something like that. But the fact is that the sooner they can go do their thing somewhere else, the sooner we can do our thing somewhere else. And it's totally okay for ideas to have fertile ground to see what fruits they bring forth.
You emphasized voluntarist. I had a question about this recently, and I know that other people also might have a question about it. Can you briefly explain the difference between voluntarism and voluntaryism? Because there is a difference.
There is a
difference. I didn't know that until just last week.
Commonly, they're used interchangeably, but there is a connotation, not a connotation, but there is an earlier meaning for the word voluntarist, voluntarism, and that is, it comes from a religious concept that the mission of man is to experience and to practice free will, that we're sent here to have the fullest human experience possible for a spiritual reason, and that there's spiritual consequence for all of our decisions and controlling and making right decisions for our whole life experience here. So voluntarism is a social and economic system where all interactions are voluntary. So that's anarchism. There's no rulers. And anarchism is part of this much bigger picture, which to me is the spiritual mission of man. Like the reason we're actually here. It's much more than just, we like Bitcoin, or we don't want government surveillance, or we think 9/11 was an inside job. It's not just being anti-government. It's about being pro-human life experience and the spiritual necessity for free will, and to have an authentic relationship with nature without the subsidies and penalties that government puts on our interactions and our experience, our authentic experience with this human life.
That was beautiful. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Who created Bitcoin?
I have no idea.
Fair enough. Is the Earth flat?
In some places.
Great answer. Who is QAnon?
I have no idea.
Also very fair. So how can people find you online so they can keep hearing some more wisdom from you? Because I know that personally, you've had a major impact on my life.
How so?
Who's interviewing you? Well, you activated or helped to heal my relationship with money and gave me practical tools to utilize to grow wealth in a way that benefits all parties involved. So you've really changed my life.
So how did that happen? Like, let's talk more.
Okay.
Just conversational. What's your side of this story?
Well, I was looking for a way out of Los Angeles because I am not of the same mindset as most people that I was around in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been following a dream. I had been following a dream that wasn't serving me anymore, but I was still following it because...
And that's acting.
Because I didn't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a wonderful girlfriend, who was also looking for something else outside of the rat race that is Hollywood acting. And we were asking our peers what we should do. And you gave us... Well, you actually said the magic word. You said, if I were you, I would do this.
What did I say? You should do what?
You said that we should buy an RV, move to Las Vegas.
That wasn't the first thing I said. I said you should do something with real estate or something where there's residuals.
Oh, okay.
Passive income.
So you're right. Okay, so after talking to us about real estate
because it was at Acapulco that we first started this conversation, right?
So Anam and I met each other at Acapulco, like I said at the beginning of this show. At the first one, which is what year now? 2015?
That's 4 years ago now.
When it was very small, and it's grown a lot in the last few years. And yeah, like I said, I mean, my girlfriend and I have been trying to be more financially literate. And side note here, I use this as an example with people all the time too. This, to me, is proof that this system does not want us to succeed.
Definitely not.
We get absolutely no education on money at all. Zero. Nothing.
Yeah.
And this is the number one tool you need to not only thrive, but just to function in this society. And the system tells us to, get good grades and graduate high school and go to college and get a master's degree and get a PhD, all the while having any sort of financial education is non-existent. Yeah. That's proof to me that this system doesn't want us to succeed. And I was very much guilty of that, of being ignorant. And I have a master's degree, and I also have a lot of student debt as a result. But I have a master's degree, and I walked away with 2 degrees and no education on money. So now in my 30s, I'm now seeing my life as being long. I guess in my 20s, I didn't really see that. I saw I'll just figure it out. That was sort of the way I always...
That's how 20s think, yeah.
Yeah, so then in my 30s now, and walking away from the career path that I was on, that I always thought would work out, And with a partner whom I love and want to create a life with, I thought, man, I need to figure this out. Because now I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking about the rest of my life, and I'm thinking I don't want to suffer. I don't want to worry about money as much as I don't like money. This is in the past.
Right.
Because I don't like it, I have to, I have to come to terms with its existence and stop blaming it for my problems. And you came in and started talking to us about real estate and how to apply a very principled approach to real estate and owning property and making sure that everybody wins in a transaction.
Yeah.
And that was enough for us to be sold. And then that's when you suggested that we buy an RV because paying rent every month was a liability that we weren't going to get anything for on the other end.
I think you had heard that I teach Prima.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd seen some posts you'd done about real estate, and you also have a good sense of humor, and I'm always able to pick up on someone's humor. And
Most people can't pick up on my humor.
Well, I love dry humor and I love subtle humor, and it was definitely present in the way something you posted in particular. I was like, this is funny. Not only funny, this is smartly funny, which I appreciate. But you also obviously knew what you were doing with real estate, and so when we were trying to figure out how to take our financial awareness and also healing, because it has been a healing process as well, to the next level, you stepped in and took care of business.
I think you guys had heard, maybe you had heard that I'm teaching Prima, which is Paiseanta's real estate mentoring for anarchists, which is a mentorship. It's also a partnership in which I teach anarchists how to invest in real estate with, basically we start out with 2 really low risk investing techniques that don't require any experience or money or even credit. Because that was I was really pumping out a lot of material for that right before Anarchy. But I remember that you and your partner pulled me aside at Anarchy and said, hey, we want to do something that's more in line with our values and more productive. And that's when I started to tell you about real estate and how you can do these transactions that help the seller, the buyer. I mean, we want to do anarchist type transactions where we seek to add value to all parties. There doesn't have to be a win-lose scenario. And in something that's a big ticket item like a house, it can be a win-win-win-win-win scenario for the lender. Like the house that we're sitting in front of right now is a rehab project that I'm doing. And the sellers had bad renters in it. And the owners, actually, the parents had died. And so the renters that were in the house had to leave. And then the house needed repair, but the people who inherited the house didn't know how to do that. And so they called me. That was a word of mouth networking that happened, which is how I got information on this property. And so the people who inherited the house needed a quick solution, so I helped them. My lender lent me money as another investor that's a sometimes partner of mine, lent me money at a rate that makes it a complete win for him. And then he is also, we signed a deed of trust so that he's secure as well. The people who end up buying the house are going to have a safe and functional place for their family to live. So they're served. And depending on how you construct a real estate transaction, you can do things like sell with a lease and an option, which provides an opportunity for someone who doesn't have a bank loan set up yet, but can possibly close one within 2 years. So you're kind of like widening the audience of people that can become customers, basically. And I think that it's a pleasure and it's a privilege for me to help you and your partner out with real estate. And honestly, I'm super proud. Like I tell everybody I know when I'm telling them about you guys, I tell them about, you wouldn't believe this. Like I teach a lot of people these techniques, and these principles, but Benny and his partner have like really taken off with it. Like not only do they have the information now, which is not enough, but they also have like the drive to be a success at it and to take themselves to the next level. And I know what you're going to do because I see in you what is in me, and that's as soon as you get up one level, you're going to start helping people get up another level in their own ability, financial ability. And that's why I'm so passionate about Prima and about just helping all my friends with real estate and financial fitness in general, because what's more important than political freedom? Financial freedom affects us every single day. Every decision we make is empowered by our financial fitness. And political freedom doesn't matter at all if we're too poor to make decisions anyway, right? So I'm all about like adding value to everyone I interact with and trying to make this world better through voluntary interactions. And I think real estate is a way to make a more powerful impact.
Mm-hmm. And everyone always needs shelter.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always going to be room for people who can provide shelter. It really was a game changer for us, and I'm glad that you can see how motivated we are, because we really dropped everything. I mean, I live in Washington now because of this decision. I live in a travel trailer now because of this decision.
So what's the significance of that? Like, a lot of listeners might not understand, like, well, how is that good? Why is that smart?
Well, we're not paying any rent.
Yeah.
By the value that I bring to the world, I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I know a lot of people who like me and are okay with me staying on their property for free because they respect who I am, and I'm not taking advantage of anybody in a negative way. Mm-hmm. We are only benefiting from being here at this house that Anam is rehabbing, and we are continuing our education and our move towards financial freedom. And it really has been a game changer. And also, I don't know if you may have mentioned this just a second ago, but as far as value adding, I mean, what's been really cool here in the rehab process is the people in the neighborhood are also really happy seeing the house getting a facelift, because it brings up the overall vibration of the neighborhood. Everybody benefits. Everybody's happy to see a house that, used to be a black hole.
Yeah.
Site for, really just sort of a dismal blot on the street, now is looking great, and it's going to be a great house for whoever buys it. So everybody's happy. It really is a win-win.
It brings up the values of the other houses.
And you know what? The fucking bank doesn't have anything to do with it, and I like that a lot as well.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really beautiful, and we're really motivated. And like you said, also, I mean, you're right. Part of our, we are very driven in this, but an element of that is having the wisdom and the knowledge in order to share it with people that I know and love, because not only was I deprived of the education and money, but everyone else I know was too.
Yeah.
And I see so many people that I love and care about in a tough spot, or having to work some job that takes away all of their time.
You're going to get me started.
But takes away all of their time and energy, and they have this energy like, well, it's not that bad.
One of the most tragic things that I ever hear come out of another human's mouth, Benny, is that I would love to go do this, some event or some awesome opportunity, but I can't because I don't have the time or I can't afford it. To me, like, we were sent here either by the universe or by God or whatever to live 80 years that impact us, that mean something, that we're supposed to have passion about. And for people, especially beyond their 20s, to talk about, I can't afford it, or I don't have the time, it to me just seems like one of the saddest things in the world. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching, especially anarchists, about financial freedom, because it's all about the life experience. It really is. And the more of a choice that we can make. And I want to plug that I'm teaching a financial workshop at Anarchy this year. Look for Anam Paiseanta talking about financial fitness, not just about real estate and not just about Prima, but we're talking about some of the concepts that we were not taught in government schools that will help you develop a new paradigm, an empowered paradigm about money. And you're going to hear about three concepts right off the bat that you've probably never heard of, but that are essential for financial fitness. And once you hear about these things, you're going to say this phrase that we say so often: why wasn't I taught this before? And why am I now in my 30s or 40s just now hearing about this? And oh, duh, no wonder my results have been so different than what I wanted them to be. It's because they're the obvious results for the path I was on until I heard about these three concepts. I'm super psyched about that, and I'm hoping it really helps a lot of people.
If you can, come to Anarchapulco. Anam's going to be there. I'm going to be there. A lot of other amazing people are going to be there. Just come. It's going to be awesome. I want to keep talking about this stuff, but we've run out of time. Can we do this again? Will you come back on the show and we can talk maybe specifically about finances and money and real estate and value adding and all that other good stuff that's important for people to understand? Also, that would give them the courage to maybe take that next leap away from the system towards an anarchist, principled lifestyle.
I'll have to look at my schedule, but for you, Benny, and for our anarchist listeners, yeah,
okay,
we'll make it work.
So you have a motorcycle club. How can people find you online if they want to learn more?
Check us out on Facebook. My name is Anam, A-N-A-M, Paiseanta. There's probably only one of me on the internet. Just type it into any web search. Look for me and direct message me if you want to learn more about Prima. If you want to learn about the Voluntarist Brotherhood Motorcycle Club, and if you have a motorcycle and if you adhere to the principles of the non-aggression principle and self-ownership, we would love to talk to you about riding with us.
Anam, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. Until next time, this is Benny without Kevin, the JoyCamp Podcast.